Okay, so I wanted to share the story that changed my life. I met God. I feel like I met God. But I'll backtrack a little bit. So I think in 2011 or 12, my friend Jimmy went into a coma, and he passed out, and then he never woke up again, really. But he was in the hospital here in Seattle, and everyone was going to see him, and I was super distraught. It was a real shock to lose him. He was a really magnanimous person, very impactful. And so I kind of spent this time thinking, like, where is he? And like a child, I kind of went on this mad research, trying to figure out, like, where was Jimmy, right? Because, like, he wasn't here, but he wasn't there. He hadn't crossed over, but he wasn't really on Earth. And so, like, where was he? And that exploration helped me develop an idea or this concept around what I thought God was. I didn't really grow up with religion, so I never had that conditioned in a way. So it's something I got to just kind of create on my own. Anyway, my idea was basically that God was the universe, that they were one and the same, and that, like, this universal energy we all share is actually God. And I kind of felt like when we die, we just sort of turn into cosmic soup, but go on living like a really rich experience. So, okay, flash forward. 2016, I am about to leave to Scotland to go get married. My husband lived there at the time, and my neighbor was dating this guy who was super weird. None of us really understood it. We just thought he was kind of a weirdo. That was it. I mean, he was a perfectly nice guy, but he just was a bit odd. And I was having my wedding ring delivered, and I needed someone to sign for it. So I sent him a text and said, like, hey, can you sign for my ring? He said yes. And then I was going about my day. Now, I was scheduled to go to a press conference or a press release that day. And I was driving around running all these last minute errands in Seattle, and pretty excited actually about going to the press event. And I was driving south on I-5, which is the main interstate here, and I was coming up on my exit, and all of a sudden I just, like, my car, this big breeze came across the motorway and, like, pulled my car, and I felt my car kind of pull. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, you know what I don't need to be driving around in this weather. It's aggressive. And I just made this instant decision without really thinking about it to, like, go home. And so I had to merge my car across 4 lanes of traffic, got to my exit, and I was like, oh my God, okay. And then went home. And the interesting thing is that really opened up my afternoon, because because I was leaving, was pretty scheduled and pretty tight. And now all of a sudden I had this time free. So I get home, I knock on my neighbor's door, I say, hey, do you have my wedding ring? He says, yes, actually, and I'm so happy that you're home. Do you mind if I come in for a minute? And he, like, walks into my house and sits down on my couch. This is my friend's weird neighbor. This is my friend's weird boyfriend, my neighbor's weird boyfriend. And so I'm like, yeah, sure, come in. He had just returned from a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which is a 10-day silent retreat. And anyway, he's like, yeah, I would love to tell you about my experience. And he sits down on the couch and he starts telling me about his experience. And he was in really deep meditations, and he felt like he was out of his body, and all this really interesting, energetic stuff. He's like, like, I got up and I saw myself in front of myself, and I sat for 12 hours and I didn't eat or drink or move. I didn't move an inch. I meditated the entire time. He was really extreme. Most people on these retreats take breaks and stuff, but he didn't really take breaks. And he said, and then he started hearing in his head, like, voices and or like messages, and he was talking with this thing that he thought was in his head, and the thing basically was saying it was God. And Tony says, if this is God, put deer in front of my little room that I'm sleeping in. And then I'll know for sure. It's like a validation, right? So he left the meditation hall, and I think there was some like deer out in the field, and he says to the thing in his head that he's conversing with, no, put it like right in front of my room. And he goes back to his room, and he kind of like, walks into the bathroom, goes to the bathroom, comes back out, grabs an apple out of a bowl, starts eating the apple, and he like stands at his window just kind of absentmindedly, and there's a deer looking at him right in the window. And he was like, oh my God. So he walks out of his room, and there were 3 deer, and he was able to walk up to the deer and like hand the deer his apple, and the deer took his apple. And at that moment he was like, okay, this is God. And they're like, yeah, that's right. And he was like, okay, I'm all in. And he stopped resisting the idea that he was hearing these voices in his head, and then spent the next couple days in meditation with this entity or energy or experience, having these conversations, having these seeing things, and kind of getting to like understand what it was to be with God. So he's telling me this whole story, and I'm like, okay. Okay. And I'm pretty fascinated, actually. And now he starts saying like, yeah, and when we die, and there's this whole other plane, and it's not all about this plane, it's about other planes, and there are people and there are helpers. And now I'm like really, really interested. Now, he had prefaced this conversation by saying that he had to leave at a certain time. I think it was like, let's say 1:30, right? I have to leave at 1:30. I have to be at work to meet with the client. And I was like, okay, cool. So he's telling the story, and I'm getting really engaged in the story. And I'm looking at the clock, and the clock is like 1:22. And I was like, oh shit, the guy's got to leave in like 8 minutes. He's never going to finish the story, because he was like right in the middle of it. And so he's talking, and I'm watching the clock, and he's talking, and I'm watching the clock. And then all of a sudden in my head, I think like, you know what, Pennington, it's not your job to manage other people's time. He has an appointment. I don't give a shit if he doesn't go to the appointment. I'm really enjoying the story. Like, why would I say, oh, hey, you need to leave now because you're going to miss your appointment? I was like, he's a grown man. He can manage his own schedule. I'm really enjoying the story, so I'm just going to sit and listen to the story. So he finishes the whole story, and it's this big story about energy and how energy works, and how we communicate, and how we can communicate with God, and how we can receive messages, and all this stuff that I really had thought I had already sort of developed this belief system about. And then he's validating all of it. It was amazing. And then he finishes, and he goes, so that's it. I mean, what do you think? And I look at the clock, and not a minute had passed. It was exactly the same time it was when he started telling the whole big story. That probably went on for, I don't know, 8 minutes, 12 minutes. I have no idea, 6 minutes, but it certainly was not the same time. And I started laughing, and I was like, oh my God. And he goes, I know, you probably think I'm crazy, right? Like, this sounds crazy. I feel like I'm going fucking crazy, like I'm losing my mind. And I said, no, that's not why I'm laughing. I'm laughing because we just stopped time. And he goes, oh yeah, okay, good. We must have needed it. Which is so ridiculous. So anyway, he's like, okay, well, I got to go to my appointment now. Thanks for listening, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. Thanks so much for sharing that with me. Like, you basically validated my entire belief system, and I feel so much more secure about life on this earth, because it doesn't end, because I know that we pass on, and we live this really rich experience somewhere else. And so I was like really thankful, and felt really just like, oh my God, it's true. Like, everything I thought was true. So he leaves, and I'm standing. I had a big sliding glass door that looked out onto a lake, and I'm standing, but I'm in the city. It's not like a lake in the country. It's a lake in Seattle. And I'm looking out at the lake, and I'm standing, and I'm like, holy shit, it's all real. I can't believe it. And I go to grab my phone. There's a hummingbird right here with me. I grab my phone to text my friend Susan. Susan is an energetic healer, and I'm going to ask her, like, can you stop time? Basically, because I feel like I'm fucking going crazy now too, right? And so I grab my phone, and right as I grab my phone, bing, a text comes in from Tony. And it says, hey, Amy, can you please let me know how you feel about everything I just said? oh, no, I'm sorry. Wait, what's the order here? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. A crucial part of the story that I left out. So I'm standing there looking out my window and I'm like, oh my God, everything is true. Everything that he just said, like everything I believe is real. And as I said, it was a really, really stormy day. It's why I went home. So like the wind was whipping across the trees on the lake, and like there's white caps on the lake, this really gentle lake. And I'm watching outside and I see like in this very gray day, there's like a sunbeam coming down like this, almost like you see it coming here in the video. And the sunbeam is like shining on this tree right in front of my house. And I'm looking at it and all of a sudden I go, oh my God, that tree is so beautiful. Like what a beautiful tree. It's so green. I've never noticed how green those leaves are. Those leaves, God, they're brilliant. They're so green. Oh my God, they're like sparkling. It's amazing. Cool. And like the sun's coming, I'm like, God, it's beautiful. So beautiful. Everything is so beautiful. And then I look and then there's this hawk. Now, it's not totally random that I saw a hawk in front of my apartment. They live in trees down the way. You see them occasionally, but the hawk is like right in front of my apartment. And the hawk is doing this thing where it's like bouncing on the wind. You know how birds do that when they spread their wings out and they just sort of like bounce and sit in one location? So the hawk is doing that right in front of my house, like 12 feet in front of me. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then I'm like, oh my God, I can see his eyes. Like I could see where the oil was collecting and like pinching together these little tiny feathers around his eyes, and I could see like the color, the vein, the things that look like veins like under their wings. I could see these things perfectly, crystal perfectly clear. And now I wear glasses, right? So I'm thinking to myself like, God damn, I'm having a good eyesight day. You know, like some days my eyes are a little blurry, some days they're like crystal clear, and I was like, shit man, I am seeing everything crystal clear. It's amazing. And the hawk was like so amazing, you guys. Like I couldn't believe the amount of detail I could see here, and I was just like, oh my God, it's amazing, so beautiful. And like my heart, I'm feeling it now actually, was full of warmth and like up into my throat, and I was like, oh my God, it's the most amazing, beautiful thing I've ever seen before. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, this is God. This is God. This feeling. And then I hear in my head, yes. And I'm like, holy shit, yes, this is God. And the voice goes, yes. And I'm like, oh God, okay, wait, is this happening right now? Am I hearing something for real? Is this really real? Like this is what I'm hearing? And it goes, yes. And at this point, I'm like, holy shit. Now, the feeling that I have is like when you see in the movies and like someone's out in a field and they're like, ah, like that's the feeling. I felt warm. I felt the most loving, safest, securest, bestest feeling I've ever felt in my entire life. Never have I felt the feeling before. Never have I felt it since. It was so beautiful, you guys. And now I grab my phone and I go to text my friend Susan, because I'm like, my mind, I'm literally short circuiting. And I go to text my friend Susan, who's an energy healer, and say like, can you stop time? Because now I feel like I'm going crazy. I'm like, I'm fucking losing my mind. Stopping time, talking, I'm hearing voices, like what is happening? And I go to grab my phone, and right as I pick up my phone, a text comes through from Tony. Hey Amy, can you please tell me how you feel about everything that just happened? Now, I have just had this experience with the hawk, so I write him back and I'm like, oh my God, Tony, I am full of God's light. I am full of love. I've never felt so amazing in my entire life. And there's this hawk in front of my building and I could see its eyes and everything feels perfectly aligned and beautiful. And I feel like I'm like drenched in God's light and love. I am so grateful that you came over here and shared this story with me. Like, thank you so much for sharing that story with me. And he writes back, haha, they just keep saying yes. Isn't that crazy? It's crazy. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, that's what they just said to me. So anyway, that is all the proof I ever needed to understand that God is real. You know, there are so much more to this life than what we see on this little plane, and we just think we've got it all figured out, and we do not have it figured out, man. Like, we do not have it figured out. But it's so important, this experience I had, because I have been chasing that feeling ever since that December day in 2016, because it felt so good, and I believe that that is actually how we can feel in every moment of our day if we're able to heal and really see without filters the world and the energy surrounding us. So I hope you're inspired by this story, and God, if you've had any experience like this, I would love for you to share it with me. And yeah, I would love to help people also develop a life where this feeling comes to them more and more, and hopefully that's what I'm on the road to doing myself. So thanks for listening.